To all those people watching, I like to remind everyone that this video is not made for kids. It's for older fans and adults. Enjoy the fucking video! Agnes is one of the oldest coaches working on the Skarloey Railway. She works alongside Ruth, Lucy, Jemima and Beatrice, who've been with her on the railway since the very start. Agnes in particular carries first-class passengers and would often look down on the others because of that, since they carry passengers who couldn't afford such luxury. She likes working with the Skarloey engines, but she doesn't like working with two engines in particular due to their behaviour. One of these engines was Sir Handel. "Wake up, you cattle trucks!" barked Sir Handel. "It's time for work!" "What a horrid engine!" fumed the coaches. Sir Handel often called them names because they weren't like the smart express coaches he had hauled on the mid-Sodor. But there was one engine she found worse than Sir Handel. "Oh, do be more civil with the coaches, you bronco!" shouted Agnes. "Ugh, be quiet!" Duncan barked back. Due to his work in a factory, Duncan would often be rough, and sometimes his language can be rather blue enough for the coaches to gasp at. Duncan can be often at times rough in the yards, and he would treat coaches the same as if they were trucks. "You should have treated a coach like me like that," criticised Agnes. "I'm not those shoddy riff-raff things that you lot call trucks. I'm a first-class carriage, and I cannot be damaged for my passengers. I need to look smart." Duncan just rolled his eyes and gave Agnes a bump. "Disgraceful behaviour," she muttered crossly. "No respect for a coach like me." "Come on!" shouted Duncan. He pulled the coaches out, giving them a jolt, and they all bumped into each other. "Oh, you careless engine!" they all shouted. "You shouldn't treat us ladies like this." But Duncan didn't care what they said. If you ever visit the island of Sodor and are interested in the stories from the various railways, then you should visit the Railway Archives. It's a treasure trove of stories over the years with all of the engines across the island of Sodor, big or small. Let's take a look at all the stories that are a blast from the past for the engines of Sodor. Because of Duncan's roughhousing, the coaches were often very cross and would make the journey miserable for them. "Awful engine, awful engine, awful engine," they twittered crossly. This would cause friction from the passengers, and they would often complain what a bad railway the Skarloey is. This, of course, made Skarloey worried. He tried speaking to Duncan about his mistreatment towards Agnes as well as the other coaches. "Agnes and the others need to be treated with kindness," he scolded him one night at the sheds. "Kindness? Pah!" scoffed Duncan. "She's nothing but an old bat." "Don't say such a thing, Duncan," replied Skarloey crossly. "You're calling her that because you don't like her complaining, and that's because you treated her like she's a truck. You must know that if you treat coaches improperly, they would make an engine's journey miserable, and that would make us late, and the passengers would be cross with us, and would not return, and you know what would happen to us then?" Duncan just hissed him crossly and puffed away. "I got no time for your lectures, old man. I got rolling stock to shunt." "The nerve of that engine!" Skarloey fumed. In the yards, Duncan was busy. He then saw Agnes sleeping in a nearby shed. Then the little tank engine had an idea. Duncan quietly cobbled up to Agnes and then pulled her gently off the consist and shunted her in the siding out of the way. Then he puffed back and pulled Ruth and Lucy away from Jemima and Beatrice. After that, he placed Agnes near Jemima and then placed Ruth and Lucy closest to the open shed door. "Perfect," he chuckled. "That will teach an old bat she's not first class." And he puffed away to the sheds. The next morning, Agnes woke up to the whiffing mixture smell of cheese and fish from Beatrice the guard's van. Then she was surprised to see that she was coupled behind Ruth instead of seeing the view of the yards outside. "What in blazes is this?" she yelled. "I'm a first-class coach! I can't be placed in this position!" But there was no time. Duncan came to collect her and the other coaches to the station, ready for Skarloey's first train of the day. "I shouldn't be treated like this," she said crossly. "I'm first class. I'm supposed to be up front, not near smelly old Beatrice." Skarloey was coupled to the train, and as the passengers got in, he puffed away, while Agnes was still fuming about her position. "Who is responsible for this?" She then passed Duncan, who was sitting in the yard getting ready to shunt more trains for the day. Agnes could see that Duncan was smirking towards her, and then he laughed. "Ooh, that Duncan!" Throughout the day, Agnes had been bitter about not being in front and took out her frustration on Duncan towards Skarloey and the coaches. This, of course, got the passengers cross, and once again they'd been telling Skarloey, his crew and station staff about their treatment, and calling it a bad railway. But later that afternoon, Agnes was bumping the train so hard that it resulted in a jolt that broke her coupling off of Ruth and derailed her. Skarloey, the coaches and the passengers were shocked. Luckily no one was hurt, but Skarloey was cross, and Agnes knew that she was in the wrong here. "We'll carry on to the next station with Ruth and Lucy. I'll call for help over there," said the driver. And so that's what they did. Back at the main station, Duncan's driver received the news about the derailment. Duncan was in a foul mood that afternoon. Earlier, he wanted a polish from Nancy after Skarloey had received one before his afternoon train. But Nancy told him that she was to help with the refreshment lady by getting ices ready for the passengers. But she promised him a polish the next day. But Duncan thought it wasn't fair, as he felt he was overworked and underappreciated, and when he was told to take the workmen to deal with the derailment, he was still cross. "I'm overworked and I can't stand it," he complained. Duncan arrived at the derailment, and Agnes thought it was hilarious that Duncan had come to rescue her. "Fancy, the engine who did this to me is now helping this poor old bat." But Duncan ignored her and positioned the train to lift her back onto the rails. Then he left the workmen and took the passengers in the rear coaches sulkily home. It took a while, but Agnes was finally placed back onto the rails, and Skarloey came to take her home. He gave her a bump. "I deserve that," she sighed sadly. "So you should," scolded Skarloey. "I understand that you weren't happy that Duncan had placed you near Beatrice, Jemima and Lucy, but that doesn't mean you should take out your frustration towards me nor the other coaches, as well as our coal and water." "Coal and water? I'm not a truck," replied Agnes confusingly. "What I mean is that our coal and water are our passengers. Like bread and butter, they are the life of this railway, and without them our railway would close. This almost happened to us when Radius was working on our line. Do you remember that?" "I do," sighed Agnes. "Oh, Skarloey, I do apologize." "While I appreciate that, I think you should apologize to our passengers for doing such a thing, and treat them with respect. I might give Duncan a lesson about this too after today." And as he puffed away with Agnes, he told her the whole story. Meanwhile at the sheds, the thin controller, Mr. Peter Sam, came towards Duncan and spoke to him severely about today's events. "You must know, Duncan, before it's too late, that no passengers means no polish." But Duncan, still sulking, muttered to himself, "No polish, no passengers," he said absently. He would soon eventually learn just how important passengers are from Skarloey's story about Radius the next day. Meanwhile, Agnes apologised to her passengers over her behaviour the previous day and will soon live up to her promise. She still carries passengers who could afford first-class tickets, but she doesn't look down on them nor the other coaches anymore, and she still does to this very day.